Welcome back to Sierra Gold. I'm Wes Woodland, and boy, am I excited today. I have an old-timer in the studio here today. His name is Orlo Steele, and we're going to go back in history. Back in time, back to summer of 1950. Does everyone know where they were summer of 1950? I wasn't even thought of yet, but I'm sitting beside a decorated Marine who sat beside Ronald Reagan, President Reagan himself. He worked for the FAA, and more importantly, what we're going to talk about today is gold and the Empire Mine, the famous Empire Mine, the local mine here in Grass Valley. The summer of 1950. Orlo, could you give us a little background on your job that summer?
Yes, I just graduated from Grass Valley High School.
Yep.
And I was scheduled to enroll at Stanford in the fall, and I was scheduled to play football. And we had a mining engineer up there who said, "Come on up to the Empire and I'll give you a job and get you ready for football." And he did.
And tell me a little bit about that. Were you on top of the mine, at the bottom? Where were you working?
He put me as a mucker. Now a mucker is the person who takes care of the ore in the car. We worked as a team. We had a miner, and then we had a mule skinner, and then I was the lowest guy in the feed chain as the mucker.
Okay.
And that's what I did for that summer before I started at Stanford.
And what would a day be like there? What time did you show up to work? And did you bring lunch? And
yes.
I want to know the things that seem obvious, but yes, I want to know.
We came up, the miner picked me up as a matter of fact, and we went up to the mine, and then the first thing we did was go up to what they called the dry, took off all of our street clothes, walked through a shower, and went over to another room where we had lockers, and that's where we kept our diggers. And the reason they called it a dry is because the steam heat dried your clothes out during the night. And that's where we kept helmets and boots and hard hats and everything there. And then went down to the collar of the shaft and waited for usually about 10 or 15 minutes. And at 5 minutes to 7, we would go up the head frame and get onto what they call a man skip. This is what took the workforce underground.
Okay. And how many men are we talking here?
At that time we had probably about 85. And each car held about 11 men, and they were all coupled together. And
so it was 7 or 8 trips to get.
No, it was only one.
Oh, only one.
Because they had enough cars, man skips.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
They took the whole workforce underground, and once they had the workforce underground, then they took these man skips off, put on ore cars, and then they shipped ore up until it was time to bring the force out. So we went precisely at 7 o'clock in the morning. They'd blow a whistle, which you could hear all over town, and we would start descending at 600 feet a minute down into the shaft of the Empire Mine.
And your first time down, what were you thinking?
Well, fortunately, I had a good Cornish miner who looked after me, and he kind of told me what to do and kind of stay alert. He said, there's places there where you're going to have to duck, and there's other places where you're going to have to hang on, because even though that shaft is about a 30-degree pitch, in places it bends over to about 59 degrees, so you had to hang on to that spot.
Woohoo! And how deep? How far? How long does it take?
That shaft went down to the 4,600 foot level. That's how much cable they needed to get you down there at that level.
And then once you got down there,
then that's where the Empire stopped in 1914, and then they went north for about 3/4 of a mile, and then have another shaft, or what the Cornish call the winds, that went down to the 8,000 foot level. So we walked about 3/4 of a mile, got onto another man skip, and then went down another 400 feet to the 5,000 foot level.
And at 1950, we got electricity and stuff. Is there lights down there? Are you wearing headlamps? Or
there was electricity through all the main passageways and through the main shaft.
Yep.
Once we got down to the 5,000 foot level, which is also where we had a mule at our level, and that's where the mule was kept. From there on in, we had to use our headlamps.
Do you remember the mule's name?
Babe.
Babe.
Yes.
Honest?
Yes.
Babe. Now, okay, so you're going in 3/4 of a mile. How was the summer of 50? Are we finding substantial gold, or are we?
In where I worked, it was not that rich.
Yep.
It paid, but it was, and you were following veins, but it was not really high-grade ore. There were places where people would talk about high-grade ore, where somebody had taken a gold paintbrush and just put it across that quartz. that was not the case in where we were. They was probably worth about $4 or $5 a ton.
Yep.
But because they had made advancements in milling techniques, they
Yep.
could still make that pay. But every day we took a sample off and so that was actually assayed every day.
And then when did the bell ring? When was your day done?
After we would always blast going off shift.
Okay.
That was the last thing we would do, and I would help the miner pack those holes. And he would drill probably 24 holes, about 4 feet in length. And by that time I had mucked everything out. The mule skinner had taken the ore out to the station. And then the last thing we did was he would cut fuses so they would go off in sequences, and then he would start lighting the fuses. We would walk out back in the drift for about 50 or 60 feet, and then we had to listen to each charge going off.
Counting them.
Yeah, we counted them, and because if you didn't, then you had to go back and relight them again. You know?
Oh, scary!
But he was a good miner, and they always went off.
So then they would go off, and then that would be the next morning's
Next
cleanup?
Yes, the dust would settle them. And now the first thing when you go in the morning, we had water, and we would water down whatever they had blasted. That was
Yep.
called the muck pile.
Okay.
And because of the nitroglycerin in the dynamite, that would give you a headache if you ingested it. Plus you didn't want to get, the bane of the miner was silicosis that was getting into your lungs. And so they, that stopped that. And so we would water everything down before I even started mucking.
And then you'd head back up and hit the wet room or the...
The dry, yes, yeah. We would retrace our steps all the way back up to the collar of the shaft. We'd leave our lunch buckets right there at the collar of the shaft, go back up to the dry,
Yep.
take off our diggers, which were now wet from perspiration and water dripping down,
Yep.
and then take a shower right in front of the shift boss. And then we would go over and get our street clothes, put those on, and go down to the collar of the shaft, pick up our lunch buckets, which had then been subject to inspection.
Woo-wee!
The dry was a passive way to prevent what they called hydrating. That was taking samples home for you. And that was a passive way to keep it. It did stop it hydrating, but it slowed it down, I'm sure.
Well, that is going to do it, man. The time flies. I cannot thank Orlo enough. This is like the tip of the iceberg for me. I got like 50 more questions, but thank you for tuning in for Sierra Gold. We're going to go off to commercial, and everyone have a great Saturday.